While textbooks and standard English lessons are pretty great for learning grammar and the basics of English, they're all missing this key thing that is holding you back from reaching complete English proficiency: uncomfortable and controversial vocabulary. While this surface level English knowledge is perfectly sufficient if you're only learning English for taking an exam, it will not adequately prepare you for living in another country or creating close connections with English speakers. You will never be able to truly reach complete English proficiency until you learn uncomfortable and controversial vocabulary. So today, we're going to discuss 5 uncomfortable vocabulary topics that you need to learn in order to be successful along your English learning journey. Starting off strong, we're going to begin with the topic of health, specifically poop. You heard me right? You need to learn all about poop stuff. Poop, feces, fecal matter, excrement, dung, crap, shit, stool, bowel movement. Number 2, why the heck do you need to know about poop? Well, let's say you're living in another country where you need to speak English and your tummy starts hurting, and maybe you start having some digestive problems. So you go to the doctor to try and get some help. Well, the doctor is going to ask you a ton of questions, and they will need some very specific answers. But here's the problem. English textbooks and regular English classes don't teach specific vocabulary for these kinds of stinky situations. Usually, textbooks only teach very vague terminology for body ailments, such as stomach ache, headache, my tummy hurts, I'm in pain. But that's not what the doctor needs to hear. They need to know the specifics of what's happening in the toilet. The doctor is definitely going to ask you some specific questions like, what does your stool look like? Or how are your bowel movements? But textbooks are going to teach you that these are stools. And why would a doctor ask about those when you tell them that your stomach hurts? And on top of that, the word bowel looks and sounds similar to bowl, so why would a doctor ask about your bowl moving? That also doesn't make sense. But here's the thing. Stool and bowel movement are both related to, you guessed it, poop. Along with knowing what stools and BMs are, which are more medical terminology for poo, you also need to know about some more general conditions that can happen related to poo, such as constipation and diarrhea. If you don't at least know the words diarrhea and constipation, your doctor will not be able to diagnose your ailment. Therefore, they can't give you any medicine or treatment options to help you feel better. And that would just be a shitty situation. Speaking of vague health-related vocabulary that's often incorrectly taught in textbooks, let's quickly touch on the words headache, fever, and dizzy, because the way that they're presented in textbooks makes it seem like they're all interchangeable, when in actuality, they are completely different conditions. Headaches are very simply when your head hurts. It could be the front of your head, the back of your head, deep inside, doesn't matter. That's a headache. A fever is when your core body temperature is too hot, and this is a result of a bacterial or viral infection. You will not get a fever from allergies or if you're just tired from pulling an all-nighter. You might get a headache from those, but not a fever. And dizziness is when you feel very lightheaded and maybe it seems like the room is spinning a little bit or a lot of it. Now, it's definitely possible and completely probable that you'll have some of these conditions at the same time, but just remember, they are not interchangeable terms. They are separate, different conditions. The second uncomfortable topic that you need to learn is also about the human body, and that is reproductive health and anatomy. I don't care what gender you are or what parts you may have, these are words that you need to learn. This kind of vocabulary is especially critical for people who menstruate and or take hormonal birth control or contraceptive medication. And remember, people take this kind of medication for all different reasons, not just to avoid pregnancy. There are also a lot of health conditions that require the use of this hormonal medication just for people to be able to function in their everyday lives. I'm going to share with you a personal story that perfectly illustrates why it is important to know this kind of vocabulary when living in another country. So when I first moved to South Korea to teach English back in 2013, I had a very limited knowledge of Korean vocabulary, and I definitely didn't know anything related to reproductive health. And this ended up causing some really big issues when I went to the pharmacy to get my hormonal birth control to help deal with my polycystic ovarian syndrome. So the problem was the only words that I knew related to birth control pills were baby and without or no. So I went to the pharmacy and in really bad Korean, I was just saying baby no, or without baby no without. And the pharmacist thought that I was asking for medication that was meant to terminate a pregnancy. They didn't understand that I was asking for regular hormonal contraceptive. And the pharmacist was admittedly quite shocked, and they didn't sell me anything, which is probably for the best because they didn't know what I was asking for, and I wasn't able to correctly ask for what I needed. But if you're someone who menstruates and needs to take this kind of hormonal medicine, then you know that you have to take it at a certain time. You have to be on a very strict schedule. So if you miss that time, and if you're late to take your medicine, that can cause a lot of issues. Now, thankfully, all of my Korean coworkers were women, so I didn't feel too uncomfortable approaching one of them to ask for help, and one of them did go to the pharmacy with me to help me get the medicine that I needed. But if I had worked with all men, I don't know if I would have felt comfortable asking a man to go to the pharmacy with me to ask for that kind of medication. So if I had just learned the vocabulary and learned what I needed to in advance, I could have avoided a massive, uncomfortable situation. Reproductive health vocabulary is also extremely necessary for purchasing period products, whether you're buying them for yourself or for someone else in your life. If someone asks you to go to the store and get them some tampons and then you come back with a box of pads, they're going to be very upset. They're already in a very uncomfortable, painful situation. And if you come back with the wrong product, you definitely will ruin their day. And that's not nice. Don't make them feel any worse than they already do. let's discuss our third uncomfortable and controversial English vocabulary topic. Whether you choose to not consume substances for religious or personal reasons, or maybe at your job they require frequent drug testing, or maybe you are seeking out some of these substances to have a good time, it is essential to learn about vocabulary related to drugs and alcohol. English has so many ways of covertly describing if something has drugs or alcohol in it. For example, do you know what the difference between cider and hard cider is? Or what about fudge brownies and special brownies? A lot of people are familiar with what cider is. In Asia, cider is a very popular beverage that's similar to Sprite or 7-Up, whereas in a lot of other countries, cider is quite similar to apple juice, and at least in the United States, we often drink cider around fall and winter time. But hard cider is a kind of fermented apple juice that does have alcohol in it. It has about the same alcohol content as beer. If you see any drink with the word hard in the name, such as hard lemonade, hard cider, hard iced tea, that means that there is some alcohol in it. And there are even more words used to show that something has a bit of booze in it. And with the brownies that I mentioned, a fudge brownie is just an extra chocolatey kind of brownie. But if anyone describes a brownie or some other kind of baked good as special, and if they warn you to not eat too much if it's your first time, that usually means that there are some extra substances baked into those tasty treats. Along with knowing this vocabulary when it comes to your personal choices about what you do and do not wish to consume, it's also good to learn these words because they're very common in English media. There are so many references and jokes related to drugs and alcohol in English media and pop culture. So, by having a basic understanding of that vocabulary, you'll be able to better comprehend what is being discussed. And you'll probably enjoy yourself a lot more if you can understand those jokes. But please remember that laws and social customs related to drugs and alcohol vary greatly around the world. You cannot expect every country or every person to adhere to the same guidelines to where you are from or what fit your personal or religious beliefs. So it's 100% your responsibility to learn about the vocabulary, local customs, and laws related to these substances. The next uncomfortable and controversial vocabulary topic is something that many English learners initially learn kind of incorrectly. This is because a lot of English learners use textbooks that may have outdated terminology, or they watch shows that were filmed a long time ago. These antiquated textbooks and old-fashioned TV shows are often filled with vocabulary describing people that is not considered to be acceptable or politically correct anymore. Times have changed, and the way that we speak now in 2024 is much more inclusive than it was even just 20 years ago. So for topics like age, physical disabilities, mental health, sexual orientation and preferences, body size, sexual harassment and consent, financial situations, and race, the vocab has changed quite a bit. For example, there were some words that were deemed acceptable to use and were thrown around quite flippantly back when I was a kid that would now get someone online completely canceled. So it is imperative for you to familiarize yourself with what is currently deemed as acceptable and what's not okay to use so that you basically don't come off like a bigoted asshole when you're having a conversation with someone. And finally, you need to know about swearing. Go to hell. What the fuck? God damn it. You. Even if you choose to not include this kind of vocabulary into your daily vernacular, it's still crucial to be familiar with it so that you can understand what other people are trying to convey. So how the heck are you supposed to learn all this kind of vocabulary if textbooks and basic English classes won't teach it to you? Well, a great place to start would be to start closely paying attention whenever these topics come up in whatever English media you're absorbing, whether that's reading a book or article, listening to a podcast or audiobook, listening to different music, or watching shows, movies, YouTube videos, whatever. I can guarantee at least one of these 5 uncomfortable topics will come up every now and then. Now, obviously, not every movie or show is going to be focused on poo or periods or pot, but the more English media you absorb, the more likely you'll be to come across all 5 of the topics that we discussed today. And for more tips on how to absorb more English media throughout your day, definitely check out this video up here. Also, if you're taking private lessons from an English tutor, don't be afraid to ask them if they feel comfortable helping you with a few of these topics. And I can help you with this kind of vocabulary too when you book a class with me on Cami'sEnglishCorner.com. I have helped so many of my students prepare for doctor's appointments, learn about what period products are popular in different countries, and figure out what kind of vocabulary is inclusive and acceptable to use in the workplace. Now, not all English tutors are going to be comfortable discussing these topics. So, when all else fails, Google that shit. Just look it up yourself. So if you found today's video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out this video right over here for more tips on how to improve your fluency along your English learning journey. Happy studying, and I'll see you later.